On a monument at the base of the Swiss Alps lies a tribute to a man who fell to his death during a tragic attempt to climb the legendary mountain. The plaque, which was placed there as a tribute as well as a warning, reads in this way. It said, "He died climbing." While we may applaud the determination and conquering spirit which is required for such an effort, perhaps another lesson is there for the taking. If God were to write your epitaph, now epitaph is what's written on your tombstone. Now he won't get that opportunity for me because I'm not going to have one. I don't want to take up land, but some of us, we have this practice in our country of burying this cement vault and putting a casket that's airtight and doesn't allow your body to decompose and go back to dust. You know, I don't want anything to do with that. That's not the way I'm going. My wife has said I have to have a viewing because you all have to look at how ugly I am when that time comes. But anyhow, so epitaph is what's written on that tombstone. Now, if God wrote that for you, my question for you is, what would it say? Would it say, "He never returned my love"? Would it say, "She loved me," or "She loved this world more than me"? Would it say, "He never used the gifts I gave him"? Would it say, "She made her own choices," or "He did it his way"? Or would it say, "He was a cheerful taker"? Or would it say, "All she did was love me"? Or "She was an instrument of my love"? What life are you living? What epitaph are you writing with your life? Our scripture this morning is a section out of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, as I've already said. It seems to be a collection of odd and various sayings or teachings that fall under a variety of topics. Now, I don't know about you and your Bible, but in my Bible, it gives it a subtitle. And if you've been around here any length of time, you know how I feel about subtitles, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. The subtitle my Bible says of this section that I read this morning says, Teaching about Money and Possessions. And the reason I don't like a subtitle is it's an author, it's an editor, it's somebody who put together these Bibles in the translations that we have, and there's a variety of people that do it in new translations and various translations, and they put these subtitles in a way to get you to think that that passage is about that. And so if you read that subtitle, Teachings About Money and Possessions, when you read that, you're already starting to think about money and possessions. But I think this passage is about more than money and possessions. And so I think that if you read that subtitle, I've gotten so I don't even pay attention to them. I just skip right over them. And when I'm in a Bible study, when someone's reading out loud, I always hate it when they read the subtitle like it's a part of the scripture. And that's the other danger with these subtitles is sometimes we think they're scripture and we give them a little higher weight. But that some human being put that in there to get us to think about that topic. And I'm telling you this morning that I think there's more wisdom in this passage than simply about money and possessions. I'm not disagreeing that this passage isn't about money and possessions, but I think there's more there than just money and possessions. In fact, I've titled today's talk, The Treasuring of Ever-Deepening Trust. You see, in this world in which we live, as we live our lives, it's like we're on a treasure hunt. And the task at hand is for us to determine what will we treasure and what won't we treasure. I think it's a country song. The line in the song is this, and it is true. Everything that glitters is not gold. I mean, right? You know the song, and you know that's true. Everything that glitters isn't gold. One of the commentaries that I read this week said that this passage is a collection of Jesus' sayings that help us focus our life as disciples, refusing to be distracted by a quest for possessions, anxiety about our needs, and finding fault with others. We are to focus our lives on God and seek God's reign and righteousness. I think this passage is about priorities and about deepening our trust, learning to live in the presence of God and learning to do all that we do for God alone. Jesus ends this passage encouraging us to seek first God and His kingdom, and then He says everything else will be given to you as well. Yet in this world in which we live, it is hard to stay focused on God, isn't it? It's real easy to have something else call our attention and get our focus away from God. There are so many things that we are told in a variety of ways that you've got to have. In fact, our homes, our lives are filled with stuff that we've been told we've got to have. And that once we have it, we quickly lose interest in it because it doesn't do what we were told it would do. It's easy to get distracted. The challenge that Jesus offers here today is an encouragement to keep our eyes fixed on God, to figure out a way to make God at the top of our priority list, or to say it another way, to put God at the heart and center of our lives. He also says, where our treasure is, our heart is. And he's not talking about money necessarily, but he is talking about money. He's also talking about other things. Whatever it is we treasure in life, we'll find a connection to our heart with that we treasure. A number of years ago, if you follow me on Facebook or know anything about me, I love to take pictures, okay? I love to take pictures. And so a number of years ago, I thought I just had to have a professional grade DSLR, digital camera. And then when I got that, I needed to have a bag to carry it in. And then I needed to have this lens and that lens. And I needed to have this flash and that flash. And then I needed to have these things that reflect light. And I got all this stuff. And then I started buying iPhones. You know, I went away from the flip phone and I discovered that the camera on this little phone is really good and getting better all the time. And the thousands of dollars I have invested in this digital SLR that sits collecting dust in my bedroom is so big and so heavy that I have to have it, carry it in a backpack. And who wants to carry a backpack all the time? So I always have this in my pocket. It fits easily. And I always have it whenever that moment comes to capture a picture. And I found that I was never having my camera at those moments. And so I don't use my camera anymore. You see, it's this trap, this thing. I treasured it. I really wanted to have it. And then I discovered that it really wasn't all that it was supposed to be. And so it now collects dust, and I have my phone with me at all the times, and I use it to take pictures. And when I tell people I took a picture that they really like with my phone, they're amazed. But the same kind of editing tools that are available for digital cameras are available for phones. And you can do a little tweaking and make a picture really step out. And every picture that you like that somebody's taken has been edited in some fashion. Guarantee you. You very seldom, if it's a professional photographer and you really like it, it's not as they shot it. It's been tweaked. And that's the cool stuff. And so, Jesus says our what we treasure, that our heart will be, where our treasure is our heart. And so that's the challenge. That's the journey that we're on, to find an ability to treasure the right things and to treasure this relationship that we're offered with God. In fact, to keep our eyes fixed on God, to constantly look for those places where God is present in our day. And in those moments where we can't see God, because we have those moments every day, right? I mean, there are situations that go on in our lives where we say, where in the world are you, God? And in those moments, I think Jesus is encouraging us to lean in, to look a little harder, to wipe the sleep or the tears or whatever it is out of our eyes so that we can see where He is. Because even though you can't see Him, He's there. And when you can get there to see Him, you can come to this place where you treasure this ever-deepening trust. And that's the journey that we're on, to have a relationship with God where we're deepening our trust in Him. And, I used to think that it was all about being obedient and learning these laws and obeying the laws of God. But I really think it's more about coming to this place where my relationship with God is taking me to an ever deepening trust in Him. And that's what sustains us. Maybe you know and maybe you don't know, but Sharon and I have been on a journey looking at houses for the last, 8 months or so. We just came up on a year since she fell. And so we put our first offer on a house right after she fell. Thank God He knew better than we did, and we didn't get that house, because I don't know how we would have moved with the recovery that she had and packing and all of that. But anyhow, we've been in this journey for well over a year now. And because I had a friend in Pennsylvania in our second church that gave me his entire wood shop. And I've told you that before if you've been around. And it was so many tools and so many big tools, like a planer, a joiner, a table saw, sanders, and then it was all kinds of little tools and 25 pipe clamps and he gave me everything. I got the screws and the bolts and the sand. I have sandpaper for enough time. I won't buy sandpaper for years probably. And he gave me his workbench. And long story short is, it's more than I can get in my garage. I mean, it was a 26-foot truck Bob Adams and I took to Pennsylvania to get this, and he just gave it to us. So I really felt like we had to have a new place, a bigger place to set up this shop. And it becomes an expensive gift because, these new places that have bigger garages or have additional shop areas are more than what we would get for our house. And so we were on this journey. And in May, we found this house that we really, really liked. We saw it on the very first day that it came on the market. It had everything we wanted in the house, a detached or a first story, first level master. It had a huge kitchen. It had lots of room for entertaining. It had a great room. It had a pool. It had a garden area in the back of the house, and it had a detached shop that the deceased husband used as a shop. And it had a attached 2-car garage. So, we wouldn't have to put the vehicles out in the weather to be able to use the shop. It was just everything we wanted. And it was kind of in our price range. And so we knew before we left, we said to our realtor, we want to put an offer in on this house. And she called the listing agent, told them, and they said, well, we know that there's other offers coming. And so it'll be best and final by midnight. So we said, okay, we'll do that. We sharpened our pencil and we put in an offer. I wrote a letter hoping to get the emotions of the seller headed in my direction because her husband, who is now deceased, had a garden and loved to woodwork. And, you know, I love those things, and that's a thing we wanted. And so we wrote this letter. We made this offer. We offered her $6,000 above asking price, because we knew there were other offers. And not knowing what the other offers were and not wanting to give her too much, but wanting to still be in play, we had what we called an escalation clause in there so that we would escalate over any offer that was higher than our $6,000 over. Every $1,000, it would go up $1,000 over theirs until it got to $13,000 over asking. So, you know, we're really putting together what I thought was a very generous offer. And then to boot, because the first house we put an offer on, we had the contingency, we had to sell our house, and that we felt kicked us out. So we said, you know what, we can handle our mortgage for a little bit of time. We think our house will sell quickly, so we'll not even put a contingency on selling our house. That's crazy territory. But we said, let's do that. And we just really felt this house was for us. Well, the next day when we should have heard, we weren't hearing. And so I was texting my agent and said, you know, what's going on? And she finally, at the end of the day, she texted us and said, hey, they got two offers. They're similar offers. Both wrote letters, yours and one other. They really like both. The lady can't decide who's to give it to. And so I thought, okay, well, what's up with that? And then she said her daughter's coming from across the bridge to look at the offers and help her decide. And so we said, okay, we'll hear the next day or the next day. And so it was 2 days later that we heard that she didn't accept our offer. And we were kind of devastated at first. And then we said, okay, you know, it is what it is. But then a little while later, we learned that the offer that she accepted was $3,000 less than our highest offer. And we were like, really? We were like devastated. We were like, how can that be? And then turns out that she accepted the first offer she got, which was given to her before we saw the place. We saw the place as soon as Sharon got off work. It came on the market earlier in the day. And anyhow, we were devastated. And on the surface and for months, it was hard to see where God was in this. I mean, he provided this great workshop and he knew I needed a place to put it. And this was the perfect place. But we've been around the block enough to know that we needed to lean in and trust that God was in this. And so we did. We kept our focus on God. And 2 weeks ago, you know, I was on a staycation. And that staycation, I spent that whole week cleaning out 20 years of accumulation in my garage. I can't tell you how many truckloads I took to the dump. We had a yard sale and we made $84 in the yard sale and nothing was over $5. And I only had 2 items that were $5 and everything else was a quarter. So, you know, we sold a lot of stuff to make $84 in that kind of a yard sale. And then we even gave stuff away because I didn't want to take, none of it was going back in the garage. And what I found out from that staycation was that I had room in my current garage, which is 32 by 32. It's a big garage, for everything in the shop to set it up exactly as I would want, with a couple of small exceptions, and to still be able to get Sharon's car in the garage and not have to move my tools constantly. And so this week, we paid off our 30-year mortgage after 19 years and 11 months. And what a great feeling that was. And then, you know, why I'm telling you this story is because God sees the bigger picture. all the time. We couldn't see this picture in May, but now we can see it. And one of the treasures that we have found in our lives is an ever-deepening ability to trust God in all situations, at all times, and especially in those moments when we can't see where He is in that situation. In fact, I really think that the point and fruit of our journey of faith is building this ever-deepening trust in God. I've come to see that our journey with Jesus is really about learning to trust Him more. Learning to trust Him in all things, learning to live in His presence and treasure who He is, knowing that God is present, and even when we can't see Him, that God has our backs. 20 years ago, when we bought our house, we had no idea that we would pay it off 20 years or 10 years early. I remember the day in our second pastorate when we were paying for pretty enormous seminary debt that I didn't think we'd be free of that seminary debt for years. I thought we would be paying that back for a long time. But because at that point we were struggling financially in this time and a half position in a really large church, and God moved in the lives of a couple of people, a couple of families in that church. One of the best things that came of that church, you've heard me talk not so positively about that church, but one of the best things they offered us was a couple of families in that church decided to step up and pay off our seminary debt in its entirety. And that's how God works in moments when you can't see. Now, this week in our online Bible study, the question was raised, how do people who have little or no resources hear this passage where Jesus says, don't worry about what you're going to wear, don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink? And it's a fair question. And my response is, when we learn to treasure an ever-deepening trust in God, no matter who we are, we learn to trust God to provide. And one of the ways that God provides for us and for those who have need is through the love and actions of others. Just like those families who stepped up and helped us with our seminary debt. Those of us who have something to share are called on to share it with others who have need. Last night, Sharon and I were at the free concert at the Riverwalk Amphitheater. It was supposed to be for the bikers that biked in the Seagull Century, but I learned from a couple of bikers that I knew that biked in it yesterday that the information about it wasn't even in the registration packs, and I thought that was probably the case because the crowd was really rather small, but it was a free concert on the Riverwalk Amphitheater, and it was beautiful to watch the sun setting over the river and to hear the larks. I don't know if you know who the Larks are. I never heard of them, but they were a fun band and sang a variety and played a variety of instrumental music and singing, and it was gorgeous. But as we were sitting there last night, I was watching the 4 people dance. Now, only 4 people out of the whole crowd got up in the area in front of the band and were dancing, and they were dancing their little hearts out. They were enjoying themselves, and I think all 4 of them were homeless. I know that 3 of them were because I know them. And I thought I couldn't help but be joyful last night as I watched them, and I thought, for a few hours, there they are, just like everybody else, taking advantage of this ability to hear this band and being able to dance in a life situation where I bet they don't dance often. But they were enjoying themselves. They had set aside their struggles and cares. As a church, we are connected to each other. And as we develop an ability to treasure an ever deepening trust in God, we are able to be part of the ways that God blesses others. Because as a church, we are agents of God's blessing in the world. And there's a variety of ways that we do that. We try always and forever to go outside the walls of this building to be agents of blessing. We do it, and one of our core values is to be found among the broken. And we are found at God's kitchen, where we serve a meal a couple of times a year, and we would do it more often if they had the need for it. But other churches are a part of that blessing. We host a men's shelter, and that's coming up the end of February, the last day of the 29th of February through the first 2 weeks of March. And we do the Camden Community Garden, where we feed people. And one of the things that really makes my heart warm is when I encounter people who I think are homeless in the garden, and they're appreciative. I just encountered one lady this week who was really appreciative for the things that you can just pick and eat without having to cook. And so we are agents of blessing in the world, and that's as God intends it to be. I began today by asking you what your epitaph would say. If you thought about it and you don't like what it would say, then I encourage you to examine where God is in your list of priorities. And if you don't like it, move him a little higher in that list until he gets to the top. And I also encourage you to make living in his presence your top priority. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. For when you treasure an ever-deepening trust in God, you know that no matter what, God has your back.